Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She sat near the corner, hands clasped loosely, eyes fixed on the glowing map spread across the wall. Red circles, blue lines, moving markers that represented lives and targets. Around her, voices overlapped, men leaning forward, trading strategy, cracking half-jokes to mask nerves. But not a single word was directed toward her. Not one glance acknowledged she was even there. She had grown used to it, the quiet erasure, a room full of warriors, and yet she was the ghost among them. And maybe that was safer. Safer for her heart, safer for the weight she carried. The colonel's voice cut sharp against the hum of machines. Extraction window is tight. 2 hours, not a second longer. We don't get them out tonight, we don't get them out at all. Everyone nodded, grim, focused, except her. She didn't move. She only breathed, shallow, steady. Inside, though, the words sliced deeper than anyone realized, because she knew why the window was so narrow. She knew what intelligence hadn't been shared in this room, what detail she alone carried. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The mission looked straightforward on paper. Hostages held in an abandoned textile mill. Guard rotation light at dawn, heavier after. A clean strike before the shift change, extraction by rotor, textbook. But nothing about it was textbook, not for her. Because one of those hostages wasn't just a name on a manifest. Her thumb rubbed over the edge of the table, the tiniest movement, a ritual to ground herself. She kept her face blank, no trace of the storm twisting beneath her ribs. The briefing ended, chairs scraped, boots struck concrete. The others rose with the restless energy of men about to step into fire. She remained seated a moment longer, letting their chatter fade, letting the silence find her again. Only then did she stand. The armory smelled of oil and steel, familiar, comforting in its own way. Rows of weapons gleamed under fluorescent light, each one humming with the promise of survival or destruction. She moved through the racks without hesitation, hands steady, motions practiced. A carbine, sidearm, knives balanced for silence. She checked each one with ritual precision, not for show, not for ego, but because mistakes were paid in blood and she had seen enough of that currency. One of the younger soldiers, maybe 23 at most, passed by with his rifle slung too loose. She stopped him with a glance. No words, just a small adjustment with her own strap. He flushed, nodded quickly, tightened his hold. He'd probably never thank her. Maybe he wouldn't even remember it tomorrow. But if that detail saved him from fumbling at the wrong second, it was worth it. That was her way. Silent corrections, invisible contributions. She caught her reflection in the steel cabinet door, a flash of eyes that seemed older than the rest of her face. Lines carved not by age but by weight. She looked at herself the way a stranger might. A woman in uniform, gear strapped tight, expression unreadable. No medals pinned, no scars visible, yet carrying more of both than anyone here would ever know. She turned away. The mirror never told the full story. Outside, the night pressed heavy. A moon like a pale coin, clouds dragging across it. The air sharp with the tang of fuel as the helicopter engines wound up, rotors slicing the silence. The team gathered, helmets under arms, voices clipped but tinged with that nervous banter soldiers use to pretend they aren't afraid. She stood among them, quiet, listening, always listening. One of them, raised, tall, broad-shouldered, with that careless grin that cracked under pressure, leaned closer. "You ready?" he asked, almost teasing. Her eyes flicked toward him, just for a second, then she gave the smallest nod. Ready, always ready. That was the lie she lived on. The bird lifted. Noise thundered, rattling teeth, pressing air against lungs. Headsets crackled with clipped exchanges, coordinates, confirmations. She sat near the rear, strapped in, hands folded in her lap. She could feel her pulse against her wrists. Steady, measured. But each beat carried a memory she couldn't silence. Because the hostage, the one they didn't know mattered, was her sister. The thought flared like lightning, then she shoved it down. No one could see it on her face. No one could hear it in her voice. The mission had to stay bigger than her. If they sensed hesitation, the plan would unravel. If they knew, they might try to stop her. So she buried it, the way she always had. Below, the ground blurred. Rivers like black veins, hills rolling in moonlit shadows. The city loomed ahead, broken towers rising like jagged teeth. Once it had been alive. Now it was rubble and silence. War had eaten it whole. The helicopter dipped lower, engines strained. Her hand brushed the strap across her chest, fingers curling briefly, then releasing. A small ritual, one of many. The insertion was clean. Boots hit gravel. Engines roared away, leaving the night heavy again. The sudden silence was almost deafening. Only the soft crunch of movement, the faint clink of gear, shadows folding into shadows. She moved in the middle of the formation. Not leading, not trailing. Exactly where she was always placed. Invisible enough not to draw eyes, central enough not to be excluded. Every street was a graveyard of memories. Bullet holes scarred walls. Burnt-out cars leaned into gutters. A child's toy melted plastic, half buried in dust. She caught it with her peripheral vision, but she didn't let herself stop. If she stopped at every ghost, she'd never walk forward again. The mill rose ahead, black against black. Windows shattered, steel ribs exposed. It looked dead. But she knew better. Dead things didn't hum with the faint murmur of generators. Dead things didn't glow faintly behind curtains. They stacked at the door. Breath quick, hearts faster, fingers flexing near triggers. She was second to enter. The air inside was damp, metallic. A smell of oil, sweat, and fear. Shadows stretched long under flickering lights. The silence inside was worse than the city's, heavy, watchful, waiting to be broken. And then it broke. Voices, commands shouted, footsteps scrambling. Gunfire erupted, sharp, splitting the air into chaos. Sparks bit against steel, plaster cracked. The room became motion, blur, survival. She dropped low, movements precise, controlled. Each breath counted, each pull deliberate. Not too much, not too little, just enough to move forward. But her mind wasn't only on the fight. It was on the rooms ahead, the locked doors, the shadows behind them. Was she there? Was she alive? Her chest tightened. She forced it down. If her hands shook, she'd die. If her focus slipped, someone else would. They pushed deeper. Room after room cleared with sharp commands. The hostages, they found them clustered in a makeshift cage, eyes wide, faces hollow. Relief swept through the team, visible even behind their helmets. Lives saved. Mission almost complete. Almost. Her eyes scanned quickly. One face, one silhouette, she didn't see it. Panic licked her throat. Where was she? A guard lunged, weapon raised. She reacted before thought, blade flashing, silence following. His body hit the floor, muffled. No one looked, no one saw. Her eyes searched again, and then there. A smaller figure, separated, bound tighter, shoved into a corner like she was worth less than the rest. But to her, that face was everything. Her sister. Alive but barely. The mission leader shouted coordinates into his mic. Extraction inbound. Time almost gone. She froze for a fraction of a second. Long enough to feel the burn of two lives pulling her apart, the soldier's duty and the sister's love. The decision felt heavier than all the gear strapped to her body. And she knew, whatever choice she made tonight, it would never leave her. How long could she stand still before someone noticed? The others were shouting, untying ropes, urging hostages to their feet. Move, move, we're burning daylight. One barked, though no daylight was coming, only the thrum of approaching rotors and the ticking seconds of their window closing. She stood locked in place, breath caught, eyes fixed on the corner. Her sister hadn't seen her yet. The woman's face was pale, swollen at the cheek, lips cracked. She lifted her head slowly as if each motion was weighted by stone. And then recognition. Eyes widened, disbelief flickered. The soldier in her wanted to step forward, drag her out, carry her like she had carried others. The sister in her wanted to collapse, hold her, promise it was over. But the operative she had trained herself to be knew the truth. Hesitation killed. Personal ties endangered everyone. Her chest ached with the collision of all three selves. "Clear," the captain demanded, spinning toward her. His eyes swept past, sharp, expectant. She forced herself to nod. Her throat refused words, but her body moved forward, knife slicing rope, hands guiding strangers to freedom. She did it all while stealing glances at the corner, praying no one else noticed the trembling girl left behind. But Ray's noticed. He always noticed too much. He sidled near, voice low in the crackling static of chaos. "That one, why's she separate?" Her heart slammed once hard. "She's weak," she whispered back. "Slow down, we'll get her last." Ray's frowned, but the captain shouted orders again, and the moment slipped away. Her sister's lips parted, maybe to say her name, maybe to beg, but no sound came. The hostages stumbled toward the extraction point. Soldiers hustled them, weapons sweeping, eyes darting. Every second stretched, bent, warped. And still she lingered behind, carving slivers of time where she could inch closer to the corner. Gunfire cracked again, this time from above. A guard, late arrival, firing down stairwells. The team scattered, returning fire, shouts ricocheting. Dust rained from the ceiling. The chaos bought her cover. She crouched low, slid across the floor to her sister's side. The ropes cut deep into thin wrists. She sliced them fast, efficient. The girl gasped, shoulders sagging, and then a whisper, barely a sound. "Why are you here?" Her throat closed. She wanted to say everything. "Because I couldn't lose you, because I've been searching for you since the night they took you, because every mission has been a shadow of this one." But she couldn't. "Quiet," she murmured instead, steady, soldier steel. She lifted her gently, supporting frail weight against her chest. The girl's body was lighter than memory, bones too sharp beneath skin. The extraction call came through the headset. 2 minutes move. Her sister clung weakly, head pressed to her shoulder. She wanted to stay in that moment, frozen, proof that she wasn't too late. But there was no time. She half carried, half dragged her forward. The others saw now another hostage, one overlooked. No questions, just urgency. But Ray's eyes caught hers, sharp, suspicious. Something in the way she held the girl wasn't just professional. He didn't voice it, not yet, but she felt the unspoken question burn between them. The group burst from the mill into night air. Spotlights cut down, rotor thunder shaking windows. Dust whipped in spirals. The bird hovered low, rope lines snapping down. "Go, go, go," the captain roared. One by one, the hostages were clipped and hauled skyward, bodies swinging like fragile pendulums. Soldiers followed in practiced rhythm. The air filled with the metallic stench of spent casings, the bite of smoke. She shielded her sister as they waded, crouched low. Bullets cracked from rooftops. Muzzle flashes spat fire into the dark. She returned fire with precise bursts, jaw clenched, ears ringing. The girl whimpered, clutching tighter. Finally their turn. "Take her," she shouted to Rays, pushing the girl forward. But her sister's grip refused to let go. "No, you," she whispered, voice breaking. The seconds stretched razor-thin. "Take her," she barked again, louder, harsher, shoving her into Ray's arms. He looked at her, saw something in her eyes, but didn't argue. The clip latched. The winch whirred. The girl rose, vanishing into rotor light. Relief washed through her like fire and water at once. Relief and fear, because now she was exposed, now she was last. "Your turn," the captain shouted. But just as she reached for the rope, a blast ripped through the ground. Shrapnel screamed. She hit the dirt hard, pain slicing across her thigh. The rope swung wildly out of reach. "Contact, heavy fire," someone screamed. The helicopter swayed, engines straining. Gunners opened fire, tracers streaking like meteors. But the enemy was swarming, too many, too close. Her headset crackled. "We can't stay 30 seconds." The captain looked at her, eyes fierce, calculating. She saw it, the split-second math of one life versus many. "Go," she yelled, waving him off. "Get them out." His jaw clenched, a curse tore through static, then he gave the order. The bird lifted, ropes snapping up, rotors howling. Her sister's pale face vanished into the night sky. And she was left on the ground, alone. The sudden silence after the helicopter's departure was worse than the firefight. It was abandonment made tangible. Dust settled around her. The enemy shouts grew louder, closing in. Her leg throbbed. Blood seeped warm down her boot. She tested her weight, shaky but bearable. She gripped her rifle tighter. Alone didn't mean finished. She moved fast into shadows, weaving between wreckage and crumbling walls. Every breath was sharp, every step a decision. She had bought them safety, but at the cost of her own. For the first time in years, fear wasn't for herself. It was for what her sister would think when she realized. Would she understand, or would she think she'd been left behind again? The city swallowed her whole. She ducked into a broken building, pressed back against cold concrete, breath ragged. She stripped cloth, tied her thigh tight, gritting teeth against the burn. Hands slick with blood, but steady. Always steady. Voices echoed outside, searching, closing in. She pulled her headset, static hissing faintly. The team was gone, out of range. She was truly alone now. And yet not completely. She pulled something from her vest pocket. A photo, edges worn, colors faded. Her sister, younger, smiling in a way she hadn't in years. She stared at it, throat tight. "At least you're safe," she whispered into the emptiness. But the question clawed back, safe for how long? Because she had seen enough missions to know, extraction was never the end. The hunt would not stop. Not until she stopped it. Why didn't they finish her off when they had the chance? She pressed deeper into the rubble, the building's walls trembling with the echo of boots outside. Shouts in a foreign tongue barked through the night, sharp and searching. She could hear them splitting into groups, methodical, sweeping each block like predators that knew their prey was wounded. Her pulse slowed deliberately. She'd trained for this, how to disappear, how to be less than a shadow. But training didn't account for pain like this. Her thigh burned with every breath, a fire spreading beneath torn fabric. The tourniquet she'd tied was already damp with seeping blood. She forced her body to stillness. Only her eyes moved, scanning slivers of broken glass that showed the night beyond. A voice came closer. Heavy boots scraped inches from her hiding place. She pressed her back against concrete, rifle angled, finger tight on the trigger. One wrong step and she'd end it here silently, brutally. But the soldier turned away. His light swept another corner. His curse faded with distance. She exhaled through her nose, slow. Just slow enough to convince herself she could keep going. And yet a part of her wondered if maybe this was the place she was supposed to end. The others were safe. Her sister was safe. Maybe this was her closing chapter. No medals, no headlines. Just a forgotten body in a city already made of bones. She shut her eyes for half a second, saw her sister's face again. No, not yet. She dragged herself upright, every muscle rebelling. The wound tore wider, but she gritted teeth and pushed through. Each step was a negotiation between agony and willpower. The streets stretched endless, littered with shadows. The moon ducked behind thick clouds, plunging the city into darker silence. Perfect for her, terrible for her. She followed alleys, broken fences, the faint memory of maps she'd studied. Somewhere beyond this maze was a safe zone, not for civilians but for operatives like her. A forgotten cache. An outpost used years ago before the front shifted. She wasn't sure it was still there, but she had nothing else. Hours bled together. Every block felt longer. Every noise was a threat. Rats scurried from trash piles, dogs howled at distant gunfire. She caught herself limping into open space once, panic surging. She dove behind a car shell just as headlights swept past. Her breath shook in her mask. She bit her lip until the iron taste of blood filled her mouth. The convoy roared by, oblivious. She whispered to herself in the silence after, not words of courage, just numbers, a rhythm she'd learned in training to keep the mind from fracturing. 1, 2, 3, breathe. It wasn't bravery, it was survival. By dawn, her body gave out. She collapsed inside the skeleton of an old bakery. Flour still coated the floor like pale dust, thick enough to choke. The counters were burned, the glass shattered, but it was shelter. She slid down the wall, every nerve screaming, and finally let her eyes close. Not fully, never fully, just enough to dream in fragments. She dreamed of home, not the war-torn cities but the quiet fields outside them. She dreamed of her sister chasing dragonflies, laughter floating in summer air. She dreamed of promises made in whispers that, no matter what, they'd never leave each other. The dream broke when she woke choking on dust. Morning light filtered weakly through holes in the roof, and with it came voices. Not soldiers, softer, tired. She crawled to the edge, peered through cracks. 3 civilians huddled in the street. 2 women, 1 man, clothes torn, eyes hollow. They carried nothing but each other, refugees left behind. For a second she thought about revealing herself, asking for help, but what help could they give? They had less than she did, and if she stepped into their path she risked their lives too. She watched them pass, their silence pressed heavier than gunfire. When they were gone, she dug into her pouch. 2 rations left, barely enough for a day if she rationed like steel. She chewed one slowly, forcing herself to swallow against nausea. The body didn't want food when blood loss hollowed it, but the body didn't get a vote. She lay back, staring at the ceiling beams. They creaked with the wind, fragile, ready to fall. She wondered if anyone would ever find this place after she was gone. Would they see the marks she left behind, or would she fade just another ghost? Her hand found her pocket again. The photo. She stared at it, tracing her sister's face with her thumb. "You're safe now," she whispered. "That's enough." But her chest ached with the lie, because she knew safety was never permanent. That night she moved again. Staggered, stumbled, but moved. Pain was a drumbeat, but she welcomed it, proof she wasn't finished yet. She reached the edge of the city by dawn. The ruins gave way to broken fields, fences torn down, trees skeletal against a pale sky. And there, barely visible, was the outline of a bunker half buried in earth. Her lungs caught, relief fragile and trembling. She pushed herself forward, half crawling, half limping. Inside, the bunker smelled of dust, rust, and time. Supplies were sparse but real. Cans, water, medical kits with faded labels, enough to pull her back from the edge. Her hands shook as she cleaned the wound, needle biting as she stitched flesh by lamplight. She didn't make a sound. Pain was just another shadow to swallow. Days blurred, the bunker became her cocoon, a place to breathe, to listen to the world outside without being seen. She rationed, she mended, she waited. And in the silence, her mind betrayed her. She replayed every moment of the mission, her sister's grip refusing to let go, Ray's suspicious eyes, the captain's decision to lift off without her. She told herself she'd made the right choice. That sacrifice was her duty. But the thought clawed back every night. What if they thought she hadn't survived? What if her sister believed she was dead? Would that break her more than being taken had? The radio crackled faintly one evening. She froze, static. Then a voice distorted far, not her team, not yet, but movement. Words in enemy language, plans, patrol routes. She realized then she wasn't finished. Her survival wasn't the end. It was a chance. If she could intercept, disrupt, delay, her sister's safety would hold. The mission hadn't ended in that mill. It had only changed. And she, the ghost they ignored at the table, was the only one left to carry it. She set her rifle on the table, wiped the dust from its sight, checked every magazine with slow, deliberate care. Her hand steadied, her breath slowed. The war outside hadn't taken her yet, and she wasn't going to let it take what she loved. The hangar was alive with movement, but to her it all felt muted, distant, as though she were walking inside a memory she once tried to bury. The smell of fuel, the grinding echo of tools, the clipped voices of mechanics shouting checks, they were sounds she had lived with once, sounds that had been her heartbeat. Now every sound struck her with the dull ache of a scar pulled open. She stood at the edge of the bay, helmet cradled under her arm, the weight of it impossibly heavier than she remembered. It wasn't plastic, metal, and glass she was holding. It was years of silence, years of pretending she had been able to let go. Her squadron was already lined up by their craft, their eyes sliding toward her with varying shades of expectation, respect, and quiet skepticism. They had heard the rumors, the ghost pilot, the one who walked away. Some thought her return was a myth, others a punishment, others still a desperate gamble by commanders who had run out of choices. But in her presence, no one dared speak it aloud. The mission briefing had ended hours ago, and the words still clung to her like frost. Deep incursion, contested skis, minimal support. A tactical nightmare disguised as a necessity. The kind of assignment commanders justified with politics but pilots understood only as roulette. And now she was being pushed into the center of it. As she approached her jet, her hands ran along the cool surface of the fuselage. The machine gleamed under daylight spilling through the hangar doors, sleek and merciless, a weapon built for speed and silence. It was the same model she had once mastered, though newer, sharper, its systems humming with upgrades. And yet, as her fingers brushed its surface, she felt the same pulse as before, the way a pilot feels their craft not as a machine but as a living extension of themselves. It terrified her, because deep inside a truth stirred, she missed it. The commander's voice cut across the hangar, firm and deliberate. Wheels up in 30. You know the stakes. You know the risks. You fly tight, you fly disciplined, and you do not break from formation. That is not a request. The words weren't for her alone, but she felt the weight of them pressing directly onto her shoulders. When he finished, silence lingered, and then the mechanics resumed their checks, pilots their motions. She remained, frozen in that silence, until she felt a presence at her side. It was the younger lieutenant, the one whose eyes always seemed to follow her. Barely into his 20s, his uniform still carrying the stiffness of inexperience. Yet in his face there was a kind of earnestness she remembered from another life. "You've flown this before," he said, almost as if seeking permission to believe in her. She met his gaze, her own calm but unyielding. "Yes." "Then we'll be fine," he answered, his voice faltering at the edges, betraying nerves. Something in her chest twisted. Once she had been that young. Once she had spoken with that same blind faith before learning what the sky could take from you. She wanted to warn him, to tell him that faith could be shattered in an instant, but she said nothing. Some lessons were only ever carved in silence. The mechanics signaled readiness. Engines were primed, systems aligned. The sound of turbines rising filled the bay with thunder. She placed her helmet on, the visor sliding down to cover her face. The world narrowed, reshaped into familiar lines of targeting displays and readouts. Her breath echoed against the mask, each exhale a reminder that she was stepping into the one place she swore she'd never return. The ladder clanged beneath her boots as she climbed. She lowered herself into the cockpit, the seat embracing her like an old enemy that had never truly left. Fingers moved by memory, not thought, flipping switches, running diagnostics. Muscle remembered even when the heart rebelled. For a moment she closed her eyes. In that moment she wasn't here. She was back there, the last mission, the one that broke her. The one where voices filled the comms with panic, with screams cut short, with static that no prayer could quiet. The night she walked away. Her eyes snapped open, the present returned, the sky above waited. "Tower, this is Ghost One," she heard herself say, voice steady, professional, stripped of hesitation. "Requesting clearance." Ghost 1 tower clears you, came the reply, tinged with a weight of recognition. Ghost 1, they still called her that, a name she had earned in another life on another battlefield. It felt like a chain pulling her backward, but she didn't protest. She couldn't. The runway opened ahead, heat shimmering across asphalt, the vast sky above stretching into infinity. Her hands gripped the controls. For a heartbeat, she considered cutting the engine, stepping down, walking away one last time. The temptation was sharp, intoxicating like the lure of an edge. Then the lieutenant's voice came across the comms. "Ghost 1, we're with you." The words were soft, barely protocol, but they pierced something inside her. She pushed the throttle forward. The jet roared. The ground fell away, the horizon tilting, sky swallowing her whole. The force pressed her back into the seat, and for the first time in years she was climbing, not through memory, not through guilt, but through air alive with speed. The city below shrank into lines and grids, the ocean a silver expanse stretching beyond. Clouds rushed past, sunlight fractured across the canopy. The voices of her squadron filled the comms, clipped reports, confirmations. They were with her. For better or worse, they believed in her. Her breath steadied. The machine moved as if it remembered her, as if it too had been waiting all these years for her return. Every tilt of her hand, every pull of the stick, it answered with precision. It was dangerous how natural it felt. And yet the ghost of loss never left. It rode with her, whispering at the edges of her mind, reminding her that the sky had taken before and would take again. They broke through the last layers of cloud, formation aligning into sharp symmetry. Ahead, the mission stretched like a shadow, unknown, contested, perilous. Command's voice entered the channel. "You are now entering hostile airspace. Proceed with caution." Her eyes fixed on the horizon. Beyond it lay more than enemy territory. Beyond it lay the test of whether the past would consume her, or if she could reclaim something greater. In the silence of her cockpit, she whispered words no one else would hear. "Not this time." The squadron pressed forward, their contrails slicing the sky. She was back where she swore she'd never be, flying into danger, burdened by ghosts, carrying both fear and defiance. And for the first time in 12 years, the sky did not feel like a grave. It felt like a reckoning. The horizon looked endless, a stretch of blue broken only by the streaks of contrails from her squadron. Yet beneath its beauty, there was always something waiting, an unseen weight, a hidden hand ready to strike. At 20,000 feet, silence became both ally and enemy. The steady hum of the engines, the controlled rhythm of oxygen through her mask, the monotone voices on comms, these were the sounds that lulled pilots into believing control was theirs. But she knew better. The sky never belonged to them. It tolerated their presence until it didn't. "Ghost 1, we are crossing into contested zone," Command's voice announced, clinical and detached, as if their words weren't sealing fates. Her eyes scanned the canopy. Clouds drifted like broken walls, casting shadows over the ocean far below. The radar sweep painted lines across her HUD. No pings, no signatures, nothing but empty air. Too empty. She adjusted her grip on the stick, her instincts tugging at her nerves. She had lived this moment before, flying into silence so heavy it felt designed. Ambushes weren't noise, they were absence. They were silence pretending to be safety. "Squadron, maintain formation," she ordered, her voice flat but carrying a gravity no one mistook for suggestion. The lieutenant's voice cut back through, trying to steady itself. "Copy, Ghost 1, formation holding." She almost smiled at his attempt to sound unshaken. Almost, but her focus sharpened again when a flicker hit her screen. One blip, then two, then five. The silence shattered. "Contacts bearing 215, fast movers closing," a voice shouted. The radar came alive in a cascade of red. Enemy fighters, sleek, aggressive, climbing fast to meet them. The ambush had arrived. Her chest tightened, but her voice remained controlled. Break formation, defensive pattern Delta. Engines screamed as her squadron scattered into arcs of controlled chaos. Contrails split the sky like shattered glass. Then the first missile streaked through the clouds. Alarms blared in her cockpit, a piercing warning that sent adrenaline flooding her veins. She yanked the stick hard, the jet rolling into a dive as the missile carved the air where she had been only seconds before. Heat flares burst behind her, dazzling in the sun, pulling the weapon away until it detonated harmlessly in the distance. But there was no time to breathe, no time to remember. The sky was alive with predators, and she was once again in its hunt. Enemy fighters tore through the formation, their engines howling, weapons flashing. The radio filled with overlapping voices, warnings, shouts, fear disguised as protocol. Ghost 1, they're on me. 2 down, breaking right. Her instincts surged. The years she had tried to bury ignited in her veins as if no time had passed. Every motion was sharp, precise. The stick became an extension of her hand, the jet her pulse. She rolled hard left, locked tone on a pursuing craft, and loosed a missile. The sky flashed. The enemy exploded into fire and debris, raining sparks into the blue. For a fleeting second, the silence inside her broke. She had done this before. She could still do this. But then, the voice that froze her heart came across the channel. Ghost 1, I've got a tail. I can't shake him. The lieutenant. Her eyes snapped across the HUD. His blip was there, frantic, the enemy's signature locked tight behind him. His jet dove twisted, but the hunter clung mercilessly to his trail. Her breath stilled. She had lived this once. Someone young, too young, panicked on comms. Someone she couldn't save. The past slammed into her chest with brutal clarity. Not again. She banked hard, the G-force crushing her against the seat. Her jet screamed as she cut across the battlefield, contrails spiraling in her wake. The distance closed in heartbeats, the lieutenant's jet darting wildly as the enemy closed the gap for a kill shot. She saw it, the glow of a missile locking onto him. Her hand moved before thought. A sharp pull, a squeeze of the trigger. Her missile streaked through the air, colliding with the enemy fighter just as its weapon fired. The detonation painted the sky with a burst of orange and shrapnel. The lieutenant's voice broke through, raw, desperate. Ghost 1, you saved me. Stay sharp, she cut him off, voice steel. This isn't over. But inside she felt the tremor. She had saved him. This time she hadn't been too late. The battle raged on. Jets twisted and danced in lethal arcs, missiles carving trails of fire, countermeasures blooming like false suns. The sky was chaos, beautiful and merciless. Every second demanded choices. Protect one pilot or strike another enemy. Pull the trigger or hold fire. Live or die. Her squadron fought hard, but the enemy came in waves. For every fighter they downed, another seemed to rise from the horizon. And still, she pressed forward, her voice cutting through comms with calm precision, guiding, commanding, keeping the fragile threads of order intact. It was as though she had never left. And yet, in the quiet corners of her mind, the past clawed at her. Each scream of warning echoed with memories. Each flare of fire reminded her of those she hadn't saved. But for the first time in years, the ghosts didn't pull her down. They pushed her forward. Every scar she carried sharpened her resolve. This was not redemption. Redemption was a story people told themselves. This was survival. This was duty. And in duty, she could still breathe. A new voice crackled on comms command, their tone grave. Ghost 1, satellite confirms more hostiles inbound. Estimated 2 squadrons, you're outnumbered. The words should have crushed them, should have sealed their fate, but her reply came steady, unshaken. Copy command, then we'll hold them longer than they expect. Silence followed, the kind of silence when ground crews knew they had just heard men and women fly into odds they weren't supposed to survive. But her squadron heard something else, resolve. As the second wave of enemies tore across the horizon, she steadied her breath. This was no longer about her fear, her silence, her broken past. It was about the voices depending on her. It was about the young lieutenant who had believed in her when she could not. And so, with the enemy converging, she whispered the same words into her mask she had once sworn never to speak again. Engage. And the sky erupted once more. The sky burned. Smoke trailed across the horizon like torn fabric, and every second felt stolen from the jaws of inevitability. Her squadron twisted through the storm, their jets streaking arcs of defiance in air that seemed to want them gone. Her hands ached from gripping the stick. Her eyes stung from hours locked on the HUD. Fatigue clawed at her bones, but adrenaline kept her steady. "Ghost 3 status," she asked, her voice sharp. Static answered, then nothing. The silence was worse than a scream. She didn't allow herself to flinch, didn't allow herself to say his name. Not now, not when more voices still lived. Two more closing fast from the east. Another pilot called out, panic thick in his tone. She turned sharply, engines straining as the world tilted around her. Her jet cut through the clouds, missiles already armed. One squeeze, then another. Two streaks of fire, two bursts of impact. Both enemies vanished in blossoms of flame. The relief lasted a heartbeat, then more radar pings, always more. "Command, this is Ghost 1, she transmitted, each word clipped. "We are heavily engaged, requesting support." The reply came slow, almost hesitant. "Negative, Ghost 1, no assets available." It wasn't hesitation. It was abandonment wrapped in formality. Her squadron heard it too. The silence on comms deepened, heavier than G-forces. No reinforcements, no relief. Just them. She inhaled, steady, forcing steel into her veins. "Then we fight with what we have. Stay tight, cover each other, make them earn every inch." The words weren't meant to inspire. They were orders. Orders that gave desperate men and women something to cling to. For the next 20 minutes, the sky turned into a graveyard. Enemy fighters swarmed, their maneuvers ruthless, relentless. Every pass felt closer, sharper, faster. Her squadron responded with equal ferocity, weaving, diving, striking when openings flickered. But exhaustion was merciless. "Ghost 2, break left," she shouted. Too late. A streak of fire, an explosion, and his voice cut off mid-breath. Her chest seized, but she didn't blink. She couldn't. She rolled hard, catching an enemy at her six, releasing flares just as his missile locked. It veered, detonating harmlessly in light. Her counterstrike was immediate, precise. Another kill. Another life traded for seconds. The young lieutenant's voice came through, tight with strain. "Ghost 1, fuel's low. I can't keep this up." She heard more in his tone than he said, the tremor of fear, the question of survival. She wanted to tell him it would be fine, that they'd get home, that she'd make sure of it. But lies were cruel in war. Instead, she steadied her voice. "Stay on my wing, don't break. If you run dry, you glide with me." It wasn't a promise, it was an oath. Her jet rocked violently as another missile detonated near her tail, the shockwave rattling through her bones. Warning alarms screamed, red lights flashing across her HUD. She silenced them with a flick, refusing distraction. Her training was instinct, her body memory. Every maneuver she executed was born of scars, each movement honed from loss. But her heart, that was what kept her finger on the trigger. That was what made her push through fatigue and silence the ghosts whispering she would fail again. The fight stretched into eternity. One by one, her pilots fell silent, their contrails ending in fire. By the time the last wave of enemies broke and retreated, the sky was eerily quiet. Only 3 signatures remained on her radar, hers, the lieutenant's, one other. She exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours, but the relief came laced with grief. She couldn't remember the last time she'd flown with a full squadron that returned whole. Ghost 1 clear skis, the surviving pilot reported, voice brittle. What are your orders? Her own voice sounded foreign in her ears when she answered. Form up, we're going home. The word home felt wrong. Nothing about what they were flying toward resembled it. The flight back was silent. Engines hummed, wind rushed, but comms stayed empty. No one had the strength to speak. Her eyes kept drifting to the lieutenant's jet, flying close, mirroring her movements like a tether. He shouldn't have been here. He was too young, too green. Yet he had endured, not because of skill alone, but because she had saved him. And in saving him, she had felt something stir in her chest she hadn't allowed in years. Hope was dangerous. Hope got people killed. But she couldn't deny its pulse in her veins as the base came into view on the horizon. The landing strip stretched long, gray under fading light. One by one, the survivors descended. Wheels screeched against concrete. Engines wound down. When her jet slowed to a crawl, she felt the weight she had kept buried crash into her chest. The silence inside the cockpit was deafening. The ghost she had pushed aside during the fight returned, crowding the space around her. She ripped her helmet off, air hitting her face like a slap. Her breathing was ragged, her hair damp with sweat. For a long moment she just sat there, hands trembling against the controls. The canopy opened. The world outside was too bright, too loud. Ground crews rushed, eyes wide, counting jets, realizing how few had returned. She climbed down slowly, every step heavy. Boots hit concrete with finality. The lieutenant staggered over, pulling off his helmet. His face was pale, streaked with exhaustion, eyes wide with something more than fear. Gratitude. You kept me alive up there, he said, his voice cracking. She looked at him, her throat tightening. He didn't understand. He couldn't. She hadn't done it for him alone. She had done it for the ones she had failed before. But she only nodded. Her words caught somewhere between pride and grief. Around them, medics rushed to offload wounded. Ground crews counted, checked, scribbled names. Somewhere in the distance, a commander barked orders, already planning the next mission. The world kept moving, as if the dead were just numbers, as if the fire in the sky hadn't swallowed friends whole. She wanted to scream, to let the rage and sorrow tear free, but she didn't. Instead, she stood still, her silence heavier than words. Night fell. The base quieted. Pilots who survived retreated to bunks they might not wake from tomorrow. The air reeked faintly of fuel and burned metal. She sat alone on a bench near the runway, staring at the stars above. They looked cold, distant, unfeeling. Her hands still trembled, her chest still ached, her ghost still whispered. But she had survived, and so had he. She tilted her head back, closing her eyes. A single thought pulsed through her, quiet, steady, almost defiant. Not all sacrifices vanish into silence. The night was still but not silent. Generators hummed in the distance, boots echoed faintly across concrete, and somewhere behind the barracks, a single voice whispered a prayer. Yet to her, the world felt hollow, as if sound itself had decided to stay away from those who carried too much. She sat in the dark corner of the hangar, helmet on the ground beside her, gloves discarded. Her hands were bare now, and she stared at them as though they belonged to someone else. Hands that had guided steel through fire. Hands that had killed. Hands that had saved. How many more would they carry before they finally failed her? The door creaked. She didn't look up, but she knew the footsteps. Hesitant, young, the lieutenant. He stopped a few feet away, unsure if he should close the distance. "I figured I'd find you here," he said quietly. She didn't answer. Silence had become her armor, her way of keeping questions at bay. But he didn't leave. Instead, he lowered himself onto the cold floor, sitting cross-legged like a child waiting for a story. "You don't sleep, do you?" he asked after a long pause. Her lips curved, not in amusement, but in recognition of his persistence. Sleep's for the ones who don't hear voices when they close their eyes. The words slipped before she could catch them. Too much truth. He studied her face in the dim light. That's what you were hearing up there, wasn't it? Not just comms, something else. She inhaled slowly, the air sharp in her lungs. He had seen too much already, but some part of her, some tired, weathered part, knew she couldn't hold the walls forever. There was a mission, she said finally, her voice low, rough. Years ago, we were tasked with clearing the skis before ground forces moved in. Routine, they said, clean, predictable. Her eyes drifted to the shadows, seeing not the hangar but the endless blue of that day. I had a wingman, younger than you, brave, too brave. He followed me into fire without hesitation. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. We were ambushed. I broke through, but he didn't. I heard him call for help. I heard the panic in his voice, and her voice cracked, the memory raw even after years. I couldn't save him. I watched his jet fall. I listened to his last breath in my headset. Silence stretched between them. She almost regretted saying it, but when she finally looked at the lieutenant, she didn't see judgment. She saw something heavier, understanding. That's why you never talk, he said softly. Because you think if you stay quiet, the ghosts won't follow. She looked away, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. Ghosts don't care about silence. They follow anyway. For a while, neither spoke. The base around them carried on as though the world hadn't shifted. But between the two of them, something fragile had broken open. He finally whispered, "You saved me out there if you hadn't." Her head snapped back to him, eyes sharp. "Don't finish that sentence." "But it's true," he pressed. "You think you failed once. Maybe you did. But today, you didn't. You don't get to erase that because it doesn't fit your punishment." His words struck harder than any enemy fire. She wanted to argue, to shut him down, to retreat back into silence. But her body betrayed her. Her shoulders slumped, her hands trembled. She hadn't realized how much she had wanted someone to say it. The hangar door banged open suddenly, shattering the fragile moment. A sergeant strode in, his face grim. "Ma'am, orders just came down. Your wheel's up at dawn." Her stomach clenched. Another mission. No time to breathe, no time to heal. War demanded pieces of them until nothing was left. The lieutenant looked at her, his face pale. "Already we just—" The sergeant cut him off. "Intel says enemy bombers are moving on civilian targets. If we don't intercept, towns will burn." His eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "We don't get to choose timing, son." The words fell like stones. She stood slowly, every muscle aching. Duty had no mercy for grief. "Understood," she said simply. When the sergeant left, the lieutenant turned to her, desperate. "You can't keep flying like this. You're exhausted. We all are." Her jaw tightened. "Exhaustion doesn't stop bombs." "But it stops people," he countered, his voice rising. "It stops you, and if you break, then—" He stopped himself, the words hanging between them. Then who would keep him alive? She closed the distance between them, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me. Tomorrow isn't about me. It's about them, the people on the ground who don't have a choice. We fly so they get to live. That's it." Her eyes softened, the steel in her voice giving way for just a moment. "And if I fall, you carry on. You lead." His throat bobbed. He wasn't ready for those words, but war didn't ask readiness. Hours later, the base lay in uneasy quiet. Pilots tried to sleep in cramped bunks, some muttering prayers, others staring at ceilings that wouldn't answer back. She sat alone outside, the night air cold against her face. The stars stretched overhead, indifferent to the tiny lives below. Her mind replayed the lieutenant's words. "Maybe you didn't fail today." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder, was it possible that survival, even survival scarred by loss, still mattered? That every life saved whispered louder than the ghosts? The thought both frightened and steadied her. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would come. The sky would demand more blood. But tonight, for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself the smallest breath of grace. And in the stillness, She almost felt human again. Why was the radio silent when she needed it most? The cockpit lights flickered in the dark, a faint glow against the endless black beyond the canopy. Her breathing was steady, but only because she forced it to be. Inside, her chest was breaking. She had carried the mission this far, further than anyone believed she could, and now, at the edge of the final choice, there was no voice in her ear, no guiding hand, no one left to tell her she wasn't alone. The silence stretched, pressing against her like gravity. She thought of the commander's words, quiet but sharp before the mission. If it comes down to one life for 100, you already know the answer. Did she? Her thumb hovered over the final switch. The glow of the weapon system pulsed beneath her glove, waiting for her permission. All it would take was a press. One decision. One end to the fight. But it would also mean she couldn't go back. She wouldn't survive the strike. Her mind flickered not to tactics, not to briefings, but to a different room years ago. A hospital bed, the smell of antiseptic. Her sister's pale face turning toward her, whispering with a strength she shouldn't have had left. "Promise me you'll live more than I did." And here she was, about to break that promise. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, listening. Not to the machine, not to the empty radio, but to something quieter. Her own pulse, her own grief. The truth she had carried but never spoken, that her fight was never about medals or recognition or orders. It was about every life she had already lost and every face she could still protect if she stayed the course. She opened her eyes. The horizon split into faint fire, distant explosions where her team was still holding the line. She pictured them, exhausted, terrified, waiting for a miracle they didn't know was already moving above them. None of them would hear her name. None of them would know it was her hand on the switch. And that was how it was meant to be. Her finger pressed down. The weapon system hummed, a low vibration coursing through the jet. The ground below bloomed with light, devastating, precise, final. She felt the shockwave ripple up even before the heat touched the canopy. For one fleeting moment, her body was weightless, the kind of stillness that felt almost holy. Then impact. The world tilted, the alarm screamed, metal groaned. Flames crawled across her wing, licking at the edges of her control. She fought the stick, but deep down she already knew. There would be no landing, no return. The jet was going to fall with her in it. Her breath slowed, not from panic, from acceptance. She whispered so softly it almost wasn't sound at all. "It's okay. They'll live, that's enough." And for the first time in years, she smiled. The crash came like thunder. But before the fire swallowed the wreckage, before the smoke rose into the night sky, there was silence again, thick, unbroken, eternal. Silence but not emptiness. Because sometimes a sacrifice doesn't echo in shouts or trumpets. It whispers. In the lives spared. In the children who wake the next morning because she didn't. In the soldiers who tell their stories but always pause, always glance away, as if remembering something or someone they can't put into words. Days later, her team stood at the outpost. The battle was won, but no one celebrated. They gathered quietly. Some prayed. Some stared at the ground. A few tried to speak and couldn't. One of them, a younger soldier, finally said what none of the others dared. "She saved us, didn't she?" No one answered, but in their silence the truth lived. Her name was written down somewhere, buried in reports that would be classified for decades. Her story wouldn't reach the headlines. No medals would glitter in her absence. No ceremony would echo her sacrifice in grand speeches. But across the hearts she saved, she lived. The mother who tucked her child in without knowing why the war hadn't reached their street. The medic who survived because the strike ended the assault in time. The commander who never said aloud how much he doubted her, but now carried her shadow every time he walked into a briefing room. And maybe that was better, maybe it was stronger. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And when it's gone, it lingers. In the silence, in the pauses, In the moments no one admits they still hear her voice. She was never the loudest, never the one they thought would carry the final weight, but when the mission demanded everything, she gave it, and in giving, she became something unshakable. Not a hero for headlines, not a figure for statues, but a whisper, the kind that never dies.